Welcome to the Unspoken Podcast, a space for conversations we've swept under the carpet. These are the ones that we avoid, the ones we lower our voices for, and ultimately the ones that we most need to have. So together we'll be exploring themes such as culture, social conditioning, identity, grief, shadow work, sexuality, and art, along with inherited patterns through an Irish lens. Because what remains unspoken doesn't disappear, it continues to shape us. Hello, I'm Claire, and welcome to the Unspoken Podcast. And I am speaking with a woman today who has a very similar affinity and maybe resonance to grief and how we work with it in more traditional ways. She is a death doula, a banfasa, which we're definitely going to speak more to today, and a woman who works with ancestral wisdom and the unseen realms. And I am so delighted to welcome Nicola Tanian with us here today.
Hello, Claire. Nice to see you again.
You too, Nikki. It's so nice to have like this deeper space to have more of a chat because we've had the original like series chat that we did on Instagram. That was just, I feel like a droplet in the ocean of possibility.
Yeah, it definitely got the conversation started, didn't it? That first conversation. So yeah, I'm looking forward to today.
Yeah, amazing. And there's so much we could speak to. I feel like the banfasa piece feels really alive. And, you know, just to share as well, you've done such amazing research and you've done your PhD on ancestral resonance. And I feel like it's so important for us to actually bring your research and work in so that we can not just like understand it, but it brings kind of like a deeper factual like offering or say grounding to these realms that are like unseen. So the title of what you studied was the Irish Other and the Irish Other and the Irish Otherworld. And from what I know it's about exploring Irish identity, cultural patterns, ancestral influence, and maybe that's where we start. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So it was interesting because I had an experience with my great grandmother on my father's side, who was from just outside of Galway, and she came to me while I was deciding what program to go to next. And that's a bit of a story in itself. It was being enrolled in university was the only way for me to stay in the United States, but that's a kind of separate topic. Okay. But my great grandmother came to me and basically told me to kind of start studying Celtic mythology. So I signed up for this program in mythological studies. It was an MA PhD program based out of Pacifica in California. And that same great grandmother showed up in the second class on the second day, sitting behind the professor, kind of just nodding to him like this. And I'm fully aware no one else can see her. But it felt like such a confirmation that I'd kind of made this right choice to kind of partake in this program. The irony was there was no Celtic studies in the mythological studies program. So when it came time to look at doing my own research, my dissertation, that same professor who she was sitting behind ended up becoming my dissertation chair. He's from Irish ancestry. And this question of why do so many people claim Irish identity it would not leave me alone. So that question was really the start of what drove the research and this kind of path forward that it kind of solidified a path forward for me, if that makes sense. And so that was one experience, kind of one thread I followed. And I realized that, to your point earlier, do I benefit from having a PhD? Yes. But it was actually that material, the work of the unseen world that needed to be grounded in the academic. So that needed to be brought into a way and a format that is respected, right? Not just like, oh, it's out there and it's woo-woo crap that somebody's doing or that it's not understood. And so to ground it in some research not only helped me understand my story and historical story, personal story, but familial story and culturally historical story, but it allowed it to be kind of now sitting in the Library of Congress in the USA, right, as a body of research. So that was what's kind of what led me. Well, that was a kind of one piece of it that led me to do that research.
Wow, beautiful. And I love that absolute metaphor that is your great grandmother sitting beside your professor that has the alchemy of both. Could you dumb it down and simplify it for somebody maybe who's listening that would to understand when you say your great grandmother was sitting there?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So what that meant was since I was young, so the first experience I had was when I was 12, and then it's continued and expanded since then. It's not as if I can actually physically see her sitting beside this professor or beside him. So I can see through, or the ancestor, the person who has died makes themselves visible to me. I hope that's simplified. It's not normal way of looking at the world. It's not the normal way we have been taught to live in this world. But the research I did also speaks to 1 or 2 in 4 Irish people seeing their dead relatives. So we're talking a quarter to a half of people with Irish ancestry. This is a true lived experience for them. So anybody listening, if you have seen, smelt, sensed, felt an ancestor who has crossed, know that this is part of Irish embodied experience.
That is fascinating that it's 1 in 4. That's a really large number of people who have. So if I was to name that, like I would call that mediumship or clairvoyancy. What do you call that?
Yes. I mean, I think yes. I mean, most people would say mediumship, clairvoyancy. I mean, it goes beyond intuition, but that is the role in Ireland of the Bain Fessa, somebody who can walk between these 2 worlds or lives between the world, the unseen world, and this lived 3-dimensional world that we exist in.
Yes, and it's fascinating to bring this conversation through. And I was also trying to explain this to a friend recently about my own gifts. I'm also a medium and I'm an Imbas channel. So I also have access to the other realms. And it was trying to explain that life's a little different, that you're not just dealing with this human body, you're also dealing with connections to deceased or energies or guides. And how do you integrate that on a daily basis?
Well, good question. It's been a journey. When I was much younger, I did not know how to set the boundary and container for myself in a way that was safe. So I was just open to it all. And I thought that was great until it wasn't. Right. Until it was really had some experiences that came down to I was too open to all energies, rather than just energies that work for the highest good of all, which I know this is very nuanced, right? So I don't want to go down there too much, but really it was a learning of how to kind of contain, set boundaries and be okay with that, being actually okay to say, I'm not available right now, and do that in a way that's safe and healthy, right? Because we do have to function in this world. We do have to take the dog for a walk or do the shopping or drive a vehicle. So we can't be open all the time in that way. So learning how to have respectable boundaries and respectful boundaries for myself, I think has been one of the key learnings. Make sure I ground myself, spend plenty of time in nature as a way of kind of, being in coherence, if you like, with the kind of earthly energy. That makes sense?
Yeah, it completely does. And I really resonate. I hear, the protection piece, definitely the grounding and that clean, firm boundaries.
Yeah.
Is so important. And then, when you say 1 in 4, I don't feel 1 in 4 people are using their gifts. So I'm curious why you feel some Irish people may hide their gifts or not feel safe to explore them or share them or use them.
I think a lot of people, we've been brought up in a world that values the 3-dimensional space. And 1 generation ago, it was pathologized, right? So from one generation ago back, it's kind of anything out of the ordinary was potentially pathologized. And within Irish, we were either medicated or sectioned without medication or sent to mother and baby homes for, so there's real life consequences of why people kept their mouths shut, right? And or exiled from the community, ostracized, things like that. So I think there's been some very real consequences for people who have these gifts historically, witch trials, et cetera, et cetera. So that's not that far away when we look at history, and that is still in our system, right? That's in our embodied memory, if you like. Does that make sense?
It does. And I find that fascinating. I hadn't made that connection before, how the consequences were not just like nowadays a big fear that people might feel weird or they might feel, different from others, but actually that had the consequences that you're saying. People would have been hospitalized and put into asylums or the mother and baby homes. So yeah, I really hear why that was kept closed in so many people.
And I think also people don't know how to articulate their experiences. So it comes with one, just knowing this is an ability you have, but also then learning, how do you articulate the quality of that? How do you articulate that in a way that is also grounded? Right? Because we already know that a lot of people are doubtful on this kind of way of being in the world. So how do we articulate it? How do we ground it? I think also partly we know that it comes through us. We know it's not us, right? It's not me, my ego. It's this kind of connection that kind of comes through me and comes through you, by the sounds of it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
a lot of people have a language for it.
Yeah, I understand that. It's because it also isn't. I feel like these type of gifts are beyond language. They're very. It's abstract. I feel like sometimes even you're trying to describe what you're seeing, and actually English language doesn't facilitate or doesn't encapsulate what you're actually trying to express. So from your research then, I'm so curious, do you know then what the average, like say you said 1 in 4 in Ireland, people have gifts? What would a comparison be to another country? Was that something you looked up?
I did not. That's a good question though. No, I don't. But what I would say from the other research was, I really think that Ireland, and what I discerned in my dissertation was that Ireland was one of the last indigenous cultures in Europe, not the only one, but one of the last ones. And so I think this would be a way of being. I don't call it necessarily a gift, rather than it's a way of being in the world that is more natural for earth-based indigenous cultures. And Ireland had and has such a rich oral tradition, mythological tradition, traditions that really involved and elevated in some ways or held sacred the deceased, the keening, those kind of things that took us to the edge of existence. They were a natural part of life. So I think they're more accepted within the culture. So I would say other indigenous cultures probably would have a similar percentage rate, but I don't know that.
Yeah, just a curiosity piece. And I feel, I was also sharing that with someone. They were asking me about the keen, and they were inquiring what the role of the keening women is. And actually, this is a question for you. I answered it in my way, but I'd love to hear what you have to say on that. The keen being, is the sound or the tonality spoken part of supporting the soul to transition to the other world, was the question I was asked.
Oh, yes. Just one word. Yes. Yes. I think it becomes a vocal bridge, an energetic bridge, doesn't it? That's how I see it. That the keen is it's a bridge, but it's also an accompanier for the soul passing over to the other side, right? It also allows everybody who's there, the keener, but the listeners, the mourners, it takes them right to that edge of life and death. And we're this far away at any time, right? That far away, 1 second away. right? And so I think the keen is very important for those reasons as well, right? To remind us we're 1 second away, but as an accompanier to the soul crossing over.
Yeah, I love that terminology. It's kind of like the bridge, and that also was my reflection as well. It's part of it. But in my perception, at least, the Keening women would have been women who had gifts or the ability to at least connect to the other realms so that they could also support the transition. And like you said, also use protection when the soul was transitioning.
Yeah. I don't think you're called to do this work unless I don't think you answer the call to do this work unless you are in touch with that. Unless you're in touch with your ability, your gifts, right? Your ability to open to the other realm, to the other, whether that on all those levels you spoke of initially, not just the ancestral realm, right? But the angelic realm, the kind of elemental realms, the kind of spirit realm in existence, the unseen realm. I think, we're called to do this work in part because we found our place to use this ability.
Yeah, completely. I really feel that because the keen is so much more than a human process. In my experience, there's a lot transitioning through the ancestral realms or through the lineage lines as well. So I'm so curious, what brought you to the keen? How did you connect to that practice first?
It started back in Australia, really with environmental keening. When I was in my late teens, I would keen beside trees that were being cut down. That's how it started. And that's really another way it's continued to give voice to that destruction and devastation. That's really how it started for me. That was the opening. Different. I'm sure you weren't expecting that, but that was the way. That was definitely the first invitation, and it was spontaneous. I didn't think about it. It was spontaneous, right? So
you'd be surprised, Nikki, how many people have had a similar experience. I'm having a lot of conversations with people who are just like, I just spontaneously opened into this keen and I didn't know what it was until, say, someone, maybe they hear me talking about it or they hear you talking about it, or it's brought into a space then of understanding. So I'm curious then, when did you know then it was a keen? Did you know in that moment, or was there a later time?
Oh God, no. No, I had no idea. Okay. I mean, Australia by the beach. I mean, I was like way out of like, what was that? What is that? It took really, I mean, my dad and I had started having a lot of conversations around, his growing up in Ireland, his, the funerals he had been to, the kind of all these kind of traditions around here. But keening wasn't something he really talked about. Even though he talked about the wake and roles within the wake, and he himself became like a funeral celebrant in Australia, kind of bringing something kind of full circle, if you will. But it also would not have surprised him to be talking about keening specifically. We talked more about the being called at death, who comes and meets you. We talked about like very specific traditions and roles and gender roles and responsibilities around old waking traditions that he experienced, but we didn't really talk about keening. So it wasn't, although we talked about death a lot, it really wasn't, I can't tell you when. I don't even remember when I first started hearing about it, to be honest with you.
Fascinating. And I would love to hear what your father passed on to you around Irish wakes and his experience. It's also fascinating that the lineage line of him being a funeral pastor, or I don't know, celebrant, we'll say, and then celebrant, and you taking on the roles and research that you do around grief.
Yeah. It was interesting. So he was born and raised in Longford, and growing up in Longford, his role as the eldest grandson during a wake would be to pass around the small clay pipes full of tobacco. I don't know if that's still a tradition that happens now, but that was what one of the roles he shared as the eldest grandson. We talked a lot about, his experience of the body being prepared, the preparation of the body, the tying of the big toes together. So all these kind of things he remembered. He also talked a lot about, or mentioned a lot about, his mother being able to hear the banshee. And so these kind of, I wonder, this has come through in different ways. When he was, so I think I told you last time we chatted, he passed away just in August last year. But before he passed, he had a visit from two people who had passed over. So he didn't hear the banshee, but he received his information in a way that was palpable and acceptable to him, understandable in some ways to him, even though he called me to say, what the hell do you think this means? And I said, well, turned it back on him. Well, what do you think this means? Right. So that's some of what you asked, and a little bit more. So his tradition, he talked a lot about the actual physical traditions, what happened to the body, what were the roles and responsibilities, the timeline of death and burial, keeping watch on the body, the gender roles and responsibilities, I think I said, but also that hierarchy within the family, who did what job. So all things like that. Mm-hmm. And none of that happened in Australia, right? None of that kind of, those traditions kind of carried over. It was still, death was medicalized. People went to funeral homes. They weren't taken care of in the home, et cetera, et cetera. So I think for him as well, it was a way of, oral teaching, telling me, what was done, what our people do.
Yeah, I really hear that. Fascinating. And I hadn't heard about the toes being tied together. Do you know why that is, the meaning behind that, or is a tradition?
It's to stop the legs splaying.
Okay, but it's not
very
like
practical.
I'm like, what's the deeper spiritual meaning?
Fascinating. Why this? And he just went, oh, it was just practical. Okay, you pointed it out as such an important aspect. I just thought it might be, I don't know.
My ears pricked up as well. I was like, ooh, new information.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
God, well, how beautiful that he had that clear role and has, handed that down to you through word of mouth, which is so beautiful now that you can weave some of that into your work and your research and the grief doula work that you do.
Yeah, yeah. I think, it's interesting how this kind of information comes down, and we're looking at, what is really being asked of us by the ancestors and during this time. And, what actually led me to most to the work itself, even before the going and kind of researching this academically, was I had an experience the first time I went to Ellis Island. I was living in the UK at the time, went to New York for a long weekend and went to Ellis Island, which was with the receiving hall of all the immigrants who came into the United States. And I had this experience that was, I had never had anything like it before, even with this kind of connection to the other. And that was, I was both here and in a different time. And it felt this scream wanting to well up from the inside of my body. And I had the sensation of wanting to collapse. And I could see people kind of milling about. And it was all older time. Like we're talking like 19 something. It was like way older time. And it was such a palpable experience that came through me, right? I said to the friends I was with, did you hear that? Did you see that? And they were like, no, but we saw something just happened in and through you. So that was good validation, right? Okay, I'm not going crazy because it was a short-lived experience. I went back to the hotel room and I emailed my dad and I asked him, who came to Ellis Island? Did anybody in the family come to Ellis Island? And his other grandmother had entered Ellis Island in 1918.
Okay.
And was returned immediately on the boat. She was not given passage through no kind of legal documents to enter the United States, was literally put back on the boat. And that scream that came up through me was hers. And that's really what started this whole questioning of what do the ancestors want from us? What are they asking of us? And that experience kind of has enriched kind of all the way through my research. And from that, I came to the conclusion that one, they're being asked to witness, for us to bear witness to something they experienced in their life that wasn't witnessed at the time.
Okay.
Right? They're asking us to either release that, to allow ourselves to do work around that. What of that might we be holding? What of that is in our storyline, right? What of that, whatever experience it is, what is it that resonates with us, right? Because we're the ones that we're being gifted to receive that. To either reclaim something that they did not have in their life, right? So I think the ancestors are asking us to do that in order that we heal the familial and collective line, right? We end up healing our small portion of the Irish wound, right? By reclaiming, releasing, witnessing, giving voice to.
Yeah, beautiful. I feel like that's such an important a description, because sometimes I feel like the word ancestor can feel like a bit of a buzzword, and it's like, well, actually it has a purpose for us now in how to work with them, and really that witnessing and that also resonating and also releasing, because we can carry that intergenerational trauma, and epigenetics show us that that's so in our system. And I find that really interesting, even that scream.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, did she, maybe she didn't get the opportunity just to grieve or to rage, that she was just thrown back on the boat and had to go home.
And never left Ireland again. Left Ireland again. And so where it comes through is I had no intention of moving to America, none. But because of that experience in 2021, when I ended up moving to America in 2001 was that experience. When I moved to America in 2006, I realized I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this to fulfill something within that line that hadn't been processed all the way through. So I agree. She either didn't get the opportunity to scream like that, to grieve, to rage in the way that she could or needed to. And so we do carry that down, right? Not just in our epigenetics, but in our kind of our amygdalas, in the brain itself. That kind of gets me kind of thinking then about the word ancestor and it being a buzzword, but it's very blanketed, isn't it? When we use the term ancestor, what does that actually mean? And I think we have these kinds of familial, personal ancestors, and then we have the collective ancestors. And so it can feel overwhelming for where people can start with this work if we look at it too much on the collective. What I found, I don't know if this is your experience, but I found that most people will have a grandparent or great-grandparent who's willing to work with them. So it's really that close, 1 or 2 generations away.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Not somebody in the complete unknown. Well, how do I know that person from 1847?
Yeah, I think that is the easier access point, and people can relate to that when it's only 1 generation away or 2 generations away. And I feel that's really, it's just interesting, that train of thought around you fulfilling an unfulfilled journey of an ancestor. And that is, I think, if we all think about situations in our life that we did something and we're like, I don't know why I'm there. I moved to Australia and I lived there for 9 years. And why Australia? I don't know. It just was. That's what people were doing at that time. And that was 2009 when we had not the first, one of the recessions in Ireland. And that, I suppose, at that time, everyone's like, it's just Australia. And that has me thinking about that fulfilling. Is there something in the ethers or the liminal realms that it was like, actually, now's the time to fulfill that? Or it's a cyclical thing, which I know you also speak to. So it's just kind of bubbling in me as you're saying that.
Yeah, I think it can be both, right? I think it can be both. I think, if we enter with a level of curiosity and consciousness, even if we don't know the why or who, the what for of why we're going to Australia or going to America, I think it just, if we can be open and curious, then it allows for some healing to take place rather than just like, okay, I don't understand and I'm going to resist and resist and resist. I was very conscious. So, when I got my green card, the first place I entered was New York. And I stood on this side of the line and went, okay, this is for you. We did it. Right. And went through and they said, welcome home. Kind of thing. And I knew that wasn't for me. I knew that was for her. So I think entering with a level of consciousness or curiosity, like, wow, why the hell did I move to Australia? It could be something in that, right? Or it could be something in the cycles where the collective is pulling you also into one of those rivers of exile, if you like.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it in that term before, but
yeah, it's weaving me into this wondering now that we spoke briefly about before we started recording was about the voice.
Yeah.
So I had named that, often language is taken when a country is colonized, and your piece was it's actually so often just the voice, sound, and speaking our truth and showing even our grief through our voice or our rage or opinions. So do you feel now maybe we're in that revival of speaking our truth and using our voice as a form of ancestral healing as well?
Absolutely. So I think we are far enough away from some of these absolutely horrific events in which they were unspeakable. We're far enough away. We're in the time and place where we can, and we are yet close enough that is still with it very much alive within our system and in some level of the culture, right? We're not speaking about something that happened in 1126. We're speaking for a lot of us, what happened 1845 to 1852 was so horrific as to mute an entire population. And I started writing a paper called The Muted Keen because you do not have a people. One, you do not have the keeners. Two, you do not have people are so overwhelmed with the devastation and living day to day, like they're literally just trying to survive. There is no energy for the rituals of containment, right? The cultural rituals of containment. What happens to people's grief, right? It's kind of been waiting and coming down the lines for people like me and you who are able. It's necessary. I don't think it'd be any easier to tell you to shut up as it is to tell me to shut up. It's not gonna, right?
No, don't respond well to that, I'll tell you.
You and I are here because of that, right? There's something that comes up in the silencing that it's had enough time, right? We're both living outside of Ireland as well, so we have that kind of that distance as well. Right, to being able to express, but it's the need, I think, that also kind of comes through. It's now is the time. So you had asked me, why do I think there's kind of this revival of keening? And I think that's why there's enough time has passed, but actually it's still close enough for us to remember.
Yeah, beautiful. I literally got full body shivers when you said the muted keen. I don't know. I'm having quite a visceral reaction to that because I feel there's something that's unearthing. And I'd love for you, can you share a little bit more about what that paper will, or where that's, there's just something very alive in even that sentence carries a lot.
Yeah, it kind of really came to me, and really looking at this kind of layers upon layers of trauma that Irish people have experienced collectively, and looking at the legal system of looking at when keening was made illegal, then when it was kind of, really frowned upon. So the two entities that really shut keening down, and then when it was medicated, when grief became medicated. So here we have layer upon layer. It looks different slightly now. It's not illegal. We're just going to medicate you. And so what does that mean about this kind of muted, it's not we don't know how to keen, it's just the outside forces have kind of, gagged us in a way. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at is the history, how and when that happened. And there's kind of really what I just talked about, that there's the distance is far enough away now, but we're close enough to remember and give voice to it. And we're unafraid. We're unafraid. We don't have to worry about, okay, am I going to be sectioned if I keen? No, right? Because it is growing in a kind of collective understanding. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. I love that description of like we're no longer muted and being silenced and suffocated for our voice and our grief, and it's sanitized. So yeah, even as you're speaking, because I feel keening is just having such a moment also, like clearly that is because of the work I do around keening and you. I don't think everyone is maybe talking about it, but I do hear a lot more people talking about it all over the world, like America, Australia, anyone with Irish ancestry or a curiosity or a draw towards it. There seems to be a resurgence at this time. And I'm curious, where do you see that going?
So here, when I was kind of prepping for today, one of the things I kept thinking about was, and I had written about this as well. So this is to do with keening, but not just keening, right? This is, if I can touch on those 6 cycles in Irish history, I think this is a good time to bring it in. So the 6 cycles in Irish history are, there's kind of, our whole founding mythology starts with a foreign invasion. It's called the Book of Invasions. Hello. Right. So I won't get into too much of that, but that's kind of a foundational thing. But if you look historically over Ireland's history, we have these foreign invasions, and then we have political and psychological oppression, famine, and then exile or emigration.
Okay.
And those 4, and we can go throughout history and look at them. They're in cycles like this, right? Some of them are closer together between the foreign invasion and famine. Some of them are closer together between, the famine and exile. But even what you were talking about, there's a recession, like the Celtic Tiger, 2008. And now people are leaving, right? So that's why I said exile or emigration. And I think then what happens is they're the first 4, and they're all from these external forces. In-depth psychology, and so when I say depth psychology, I'm looking at Jungian, Freudian, those kind of, that really look within the kind of shadows, the unspoken in your world aspects, is there's something called enantiodromia. Have you heard that word before?
I haven't, but please explain it.
You're going to love it. Basically, it's very simply put, it's the reversal of energy of anything that's been suppressed.
Okay, so polarity.
Shows up in like midlife crisis. Anything you've pushed away comes up to be dealt with, right? So when we've got these external forces that are kind of shutting down what it means to express our grief, to practice our mother tongue, to learn orally, to work and live in the way that we do, what happens? Only so much can fit into our personal or collective containers, right? And then there's this kind of switch of energy. And so and then the energy starts coming up. And that 5th stage is Gaelic revival.
Okay.
We can see that now, right? The resurgence of learning the language. Lots more films coming out in the original language. Musicians, books, poetry, artistry. It's all coming back up, right? And so that's really, really important because everything that had been suppressed can't be suppressed anymore. And so, but this is self-determined. Right. This is when the Irish people say something in our collective psyche says, okay, enough now. We've got to come back. Right. And so each time we're coming back stronger, it comes back in a way that's appropriate for the time. Right. So what's showing up now is not exactly how it showed up like in the early 1910, late 1897,
Mm,
for example, but it's showing up now. Right. And then
okay.
the next stage is this kind of, so I think keening comes within that, right? I
Yeah.
think keening, this kind of resurgence of keening comes within reclaiming our traditions. You will not tell us to be quiet when somebody we loved has died.
Hmm.
Who we are not listening to those outside voices. It's a reclaiming of our own authority.
Hmm.
That's how
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah, completely. And I feel it's its own act of resistance because of exactly that, what you
Yes.
said. I really, that those external forces suppressing us and shutting us down. And so now we're in the revival, this fifth phase that's like, actually, I'm going to reclaim and return to the traditional ways and our ways that's in our bones.
Yeah.
And again, I just have this sense of the ancestral rewriting happening
Yeah.
also through your cycles.
Yeah.
What is the sixth cycle then? What happens after this piece?
So the sixth cycle is insurgence and uprising. And what happens in that sixth cycle is the trying to remove that which is oppressing, right? So it could be a colonizing force.
Mm-hmm.
It could be something psychological within ourselves. So in those first 4 phases that I mentioned, it starts as an external, but we know from Belinda Vigor's research, we do our own policing, right? We do our own tightening, as to use language that she uses. And so some of it then becomes, why are we doing that? Hang on a minute. It's the untangling to say, actually, this belongs elsewhere. And that kind of insurgence and uprising is an overthrowing of that which is suppressing us. It could be external. It could be psychological, our own overthrowing our own limitations, rewriting laws, right? It could be throwing out data centers, right?
Mm.
It's not just, so it can show up in whatever way is appropriate for the cycle that it's in and the time that it is.
Okay. So what I feel from what you're saying is I feel we're nearly somewhere in the middle of that fifth and sixth cycle, or at least in the fifth moving into the sixth.
Yeah, I think we're kind of in both. We're like this, right? There's
Yeah.
a lot of people still leaving, going to Australia to work in the mines, right? But there is all this, to your point, there's this revival around keening. There's a revival around language. There's a revival around customs and traditions and a remembering of who we are, but also healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the energy is coming up in this way to say, actually, I am Irish. And what does that mean?
Yes. Yeah, fascinating. And there's also something I've been noticing as well from the different countries around the world who seem to be returning to keening. I also see keening very much as a land practice. So when you said that you were keening the trees, that's not surprising
Yeah.
at all. I think it actually helps not just move that well of grief that you spoke about that's been carried. I also feel it's moving the grief from the land that the land has been carrying. And this is kind of a conceptual piece in my head. I'm like, when I see people contacting me from Virginia or and what happened the land there and the people on that land in Australia, and it's just like, is it also time to also collectively keen what's been happening to the earth as well as us collectively?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think that actually, as I think about this just on the fly here, I think it's twofold, right? I can see a couple of different things. Who has keened for anybody in a mass grave in Ireland? Land itself is holding the bodies of Irish people
Mm-hmm.
here, Virginia, Australia, globally, right? We're not just, so I think it's twofold. I think it's kind of, it's an acknowledgement of who may be buried, who may have fallen, who may have been like, not had the proper ritual and ceremony to see them off to the other side, as well as grief the land itself is holding.
Yeah.
I think it's both. think you're spot on. It's both.
Yeah. Wow. I really felt such a well of emotion there as you shared that, has the mass graves been keened?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I've been talking to, in 2016, there was a few of us living in Seattle, Washington, and two friends of mine, Elaine Barry, who's now back in Cork, and
Okay.
Sarah Dolan from Dolan's in Limerick. We put together the centenary of the 1916 Easter Rising. And
Beautiful.
one of the things and that was really well attended, and that was kind of a tap on the shoulder by the ancestors, was like, you have to organize something. We need to be acknowledged here. But I think, one of the things Elaine and I have been talking about is actually going and creating ritual over the land and in Ireland where these graves are ordered to be, with or without markers. Because, ritual is such that the wake, the keening, the whole culturally and communally held rituals around death and dying are integral to being Irish. They're integral. When many, many, many millions of people do not have the ritual to accompany them. And as you said, I'm going to come full circle to how you started, which was keening as a bridge. We talked about keening as a bridge in a way to kind of see people through to the other side. Well, what about those, souls that are potentially haven't had the full ritual transition assistance, if you like, and partly what our work is, to be honest.
Yeah. It's,
Sorry.
I know it's no, sorry. This is what this space is. We need to speak to the underbelly of our society and the underbelly of our earth. Like you said, we're the earth's carrying that, and so many of these souls haven't transitioned, and it's really bringing. I'm sure Beth Wallace. I had a chat with her as well, and she's like the head, I think, counselor, therapist on the tomb babies excavation, and just even speaking to people so in it, they're genuinely in the core of retribution, of reconciling, of actually like clearing some of this through their work. But I also agree. I feel there's still that ancestral healing to be done and to be keened.
Yeah, and I would actually think, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think that with any excavation, there needs to be keeners present.
Yeah,
there needs to, it's not just about, although people bearing witness to that is very, very important. I do think there needs to be keeners present. I think that would just, that's kind of clearly resonating for me as I speak,
Yeah, me too. I can really feel it viscerally, and it's that there's the well of that emotion and grief is so beyond comprehension.
But that's where we have this kind of, here we have a past experience that's horrific, and the distance for us to now say, now's the time. We absolutely have the capacity to keen that, and to keen those wee souls, and to kind of keen the mothers, right? And to kind of give voice to it. This is, to unmute ourselves, right? Speaking of microphonic terms, I mean, to unmute ourselves.
Yeah. How do we do that? There's a few of us who are doing the work we do to revive, to return this tradition. But if someone's listening to this, and it's like, okay, actually, you know what? I want to jump on the fucking bandwagon. How clear this or heal this?
Well, I mean, I could put that question to you as well, but I think we just need to consciously organize. I think let's, to think about how to do that, whether that's regular keening, to have focused keening circles around a specific topic, a specific demographic, a specific place, location. I think there's something very important about just bringing consciousness to it, organizing it, and then making it happen.
Yeah.
And if we can't be together in that, then we still do the collective time and place, and we create the container and the time, and whoever needs to join can join, right? Whoever feels to join can join. And we start we start making that very, very conscious.
Yeah, I love that idea and I love that intention. And yeah, my vision with keening is we all have it. It's actually within our bones. I don't need to teach anyone a keen. I don't have any right to teach anyone a keen. It's literally about returning people to their knowing. Like you said, you just spontaneously broke into a keen. So many people share the same thing. So with some people, they have the access more freely, and for others it can be very challenging. You know, I see that when people come to my keening rituals, it could be the second or the third before they feel comfortable, before their nervous system feels ready, and before they feel safe enough to even let those sounds be released. And so for me, I feel that's the role more. It's like that we hold long enough and continually enough that yes, some people will have access immediately and others might need some holding. And ultimately that we can all just, you know, have this practice, that it's available to us in a collective space. If it was to, you know, release this collective pain or grief, but also just individually, that it's a practice that we all bring back in remembrance.
Yeah, I agree. So I think I agree. I mean, everybody has the capacity. I don't think it's everybody's calling. I think, you know, it's like not at every funeral was every single person keening. We had keening women who held that collective grief and allowed others to weep gently or express their grief in a more gentler fashion, right? It's no less potent. It's the expressing of it however it needs to come. And then some of us are much more able to kind of hold the bigger emotion and ride the wave that comes with keening in that way, in a way that's unafraid. But I agree with you that, you know, if somebody's turning up and keeps showing up, then their nervous system and their system is re-regulating, and kind of we're going down through the kind of DNA spiral of an ancestral lineage to say, oh my God, that's how many generations were silenced, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a way to look at it. That's what the image just came to me was, you said, you know, somebody had come like 3 times before their nervous system felt ready. And I was like, okay, well, that's 3 generations. That's 3, I've got goosebumps.
Oh, wow.
That's 3 generations back that they're carrying, right? At least 3 generations. I mean, that's, you know, I hadn't thought of that until just then. So thanks for that.
What I'm here for. I'll put the droplet in and then you can do the PhD research to qualify.
So we don't need that really, but yeah.
So much weaving in this conversation. And where to go from here? I'm like, what?
You had asked me about what does ancestral healing really mean and how to stay in relationship with ancestors in modern culture. So I might just touch on that just as we kind of, you know, with everything we've talked about. And, you know, what does ancestral healing mean? I think people go, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. I've got no idea where to start. And one of the things that came up when I was in my research, but kind of really solidified when I was teaching in this recent IMRAM with Simon Courtney and Belinda Viggers was really looking at, if we were to look at where we are today, when we were born, when our parents were born, when our grandparents were born, when our great-grandparents were born, write that on a piece of paper, right? Look at all of what was happening in Irish history all the way back. You've got 800 years of colonization. So actually, when I did this exercise, I went back 10 generations.
Oh, wow.
Right. So had people kind of, and there's a genealogical math that you can use if you don't know exact dates that your ancestors were born. And then I overlaid like Irish history over the top of that. So we had, you know, the Magdalene laundries went from this year to this year, 1996. Hello, that's a lot of the population, right? Or we had colonization from here to here. We had, you know, the Troubles. We had, you know, all these different things, and then literally laying one over the other. So you lay your ancestral chart over the history. And what happened was then it became very palpable what we're carrying or what your grandparents went through, what your parents went through. You know, in my case, my dad was 80. He was born in 1944. So what did he see? What did my grandmother go through in terms of history and go, whoa, whoa. And so it just kind of helps us become conscious of what our kind of immediate ancestors lived through. And then you can go further back, right? To like 5 to 10 generations. And then to become conscious of what life was like for them. So we're not asking, I don't kind of ever ask anybody just to blanket work with everybody, but just start bringing consciousness into your lineage allows for healing to start taking place. That's it at its most simplest. And then we can go from there, right? But that first thing about becoming conscious is really profound and shifts perspective, right? It helps us understand why so-and-so was silent, why they never talked about it. Why did my father completely lose his Irish accent when he moved to the UK? Completely suppressed it. Unless he was singing, right? And when you look at what he lived through, what happened just with one generation back, then we can start understanding. So that's again, I think what we're being asked to do, right? And I think that's really what it means is becoming conscious, bearing witness, as I said in the beginning, releasing patterns that no longer serve us, bringing an awareness or compassion if we can, releasing, and also reclaiming what was lost. What did somebody have to give up in order to survive? Was there beauty present? Was there wealth present? Was there enough food present? How can I honor that consciously and know that when I'm taking care of those things, I'm not just doing this for me, right? And it gives this work a much richer purpose. It's not just to heal my line, right? But in bringing consciousness, in bringing our actions to that, then we begin to heal the Irish wound, really.
Yeah. I feel that makes it so relatable, that sentence, to bring consciousness into your family line or your lineage, because ultimately that brings compassion. When you say that understanding of why did my grandmother not speak? Because she was silenced and she was told it was not okay for women to speak. Or why did my grandfather continually operate from lack? Because they had no money. It feels like those very understandable and challenging life experiences that they had are so often forgotten.
Yeah, and not spoken about. I think that I think it's not even forgotten as much as we don't even make a conscious. We don't typically make a conscious connection of, God, what does it really mean to have lived through the years of 1845 to 1852. I mean, when I was doing the research for the PhD, I just kept having these realizations, one after the other, and I accessed rage I didn't know existed. I physically threw up on reading, certain aspects of what had happened to Irish people. And so being able to express it in a way was like absolutely essential, but definitely healing, because it became conscious, not just for compassion. We may feel enraged, and I think it's just kind of tapping into some of that so it can be transformed.
Yeah. I really hear that. And it's funny when I said the word forgotten, I was actually like, that doesn't feel like the right word. But then I remembered a term that Simon Courtney uses, is that collective amnesia.
Yes.
That we have as a society. It's easier to not talk about the Magdalene laundries, to not talk about what happened during the famine. So as a survival strategy, actually, so that we can start to rebuild and we can start to return to whatever we feel like normal life is.
Yeah, I think that's actually, I just was looking at this book called Memory Island by that Una Frawley has edited. And one of the articles in here, one of the essays in here, it might be from Graham Dawson. He talks about that collective amnesia when there is a situation that is so overwhelming to the psyche. We can't. So we're just going to bury that, right? We have to forget about that in order to survive. So that's well known within kind of trauma work.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that Simon talks about that. So when that kind of takes us back to, a part of the conversation we were having earlier, when collective experiences within Irish culture were so overwhelming as to have no words, and you're not knowing where your next meal's coming from, then you have to just compartmentalize it, forget about it. And that's true right up to our generation, your generation, right?
Yeah.
Why are you still, I know friends who have been told, why are you still banging on about that? Why are you still banging on about, and why are you still talking about it? Get over it, move past it. But we know from any kind of healing work, until something's acknowledged, validated, even in the smallest way, we don't really move beyond it, whether it's our own self-validating or it's being witnessed externally. Right? So those people saying, just get on with it, just move it, why are you still banging on about it? It's because they themselves can't deal with it, as we know.
Completely. It doesn't want to sit with the discomfort because they're not pretty Irish memories.
Yeah. But this also, that thing about cultural amnesia, I think, this what we were talking about earlier about this resurgence of practices and resurgences of ways of being in the world that is uniquely Irish. I think it's the amnesia kind of pushes it into generations who are below. And then when the timing is safe, we remember. Right? We bring it back to the light. We bring it into practice, right? That's how I see it anyway. It's like amnesia is kind of like a holding until the right generation, the right ancestor is ready to kind of revive it and remember. Right?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm curious, then what do you feel Ireland is trying to remember? What are we remembering now?
I think we're remembering strength of a people, oral traditions, actual ways of being in the world that are not typical, that are not these kind of industrialized productivity in the way that we see productivity, poetic, mnemonic, memory, living in connection with the land, myth and mystery, living with our ancestors, right, etc.
I love that, living with the ancestors and way and the mystery. This is it, mystery, creative force that's not sanitized by AI. It's I think there's something like sexy about it just being like raw life force now that oddly feels unique for something to just be fully human in a way.
Yeah, it comes also back to the land, right? The land in our mythology, and it's so rich. It's not gone anywhere. It's the land that keeps calling people back, whether they know who their ancestor was or not. It's like, well, if I can't name an ancestor, then Ireland becomes my ancestor. And our mythology is rooted in the landscape, itself. I mean, it's there. It's rich. It's dynamic. It's still alive. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's like, I'm not going anywhere, right? And it calls, right? So I think it's twofold. I think it's the ancestors, and I think it's the land itself saying, remember what it is. What's your, I don't have to remember all of it. You don't have to remember all of it. What's yours to remember? Keening, right? A way of being in the world that is not neurotypical, right? You're open to other, like I'm open to other. Just working with the mystery, with the unseen, the knowing it exists, right? This kind of three-dimensional world, we know that that's not the only way of being in this world.
Yeah.
Right, the rest of the world's about to catch up, but we're,
trailblazing away.
Realizing that? Okay, so yeah.
So what is your part of the Irish story to remember?
I think in part it's bringing this work to consciousness, right? It's writing about it. It's leading people through meditation. It's helping people bring a connection back to their ancestral lineage in a way that's digestible and integratable, right? That it's not so overwhelming. Actually, how about just start here? What about starting with one person, or what are you drawn to? And just kind of facilitating, asking questions, helping guide people, whether that's one-on-one work or through guided meditations or, other
Mm.
events. So,
Yeah, beautiful. And I really feel that in the conversations we've had. You've such a gift for grounding it, making it relatable, taking what feels so ethereal and bringing it into, okay, actually, I can connect to a grandparent.
yeah, it's a
The
simple.
nervous system's like, okay, this I can actually accept and this I can integrate.
Yeah, good.
Hmm.
Good. It is, yeah. It's because we could get lost, and there's no point in talking about big, huge concepts if we can't like bring it into something that's manageable and digestible, and like, oh, I understand that, or at least I think I understand that, and start. I think the other thing is to kind of spark curiosity.
Yeah, beautiful.
Because I've done the whole America thing. I don't need to do that for that grandmother again, right? I've done that, right? So it's like fulfilled that obligation, right? What's next? Like, who's next, right? I got them both. I had them one in each ear. Like, it was just like,
You just taking a break, actually.
I moved to America. Okay, I went and did that degree. Right, what's next?
Nikki, wow, so many different ways in which this river has flown. I think it's bringing me to a final question. What do you feel is left unspoken in Irish culture? And what do you think would happen if we did actually speak to it?
Well, there's not just one thing that's left unspoken. I think there needs to be a lot more talk around, well, I think one of the subjects is talking about abuse, really talking about abuse, not just from institutional abuse, but within what happened as a kind of maladaptive way of coping with trauma and horrific events. So that's definitely something I think needs talking about. I also, it's interesting. I'm finding myself resisting talking about what I think is left unspoken. So maybe I'll leave it maybe I'll leave it there for the minute to kind of help
Yeah.
me I'll kind of gather my thoughts a bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Gorgeous. Well, I feel we're naturally coming to the close of this deeply inspiring conversation. And I've learned and seeds have planted in me through this. I'm like, I don't even know where to go.
Take a minute, let it integrate.
Yeah,
Well,
I
thank
will.
you. Yeah, thank you. It's always, I appreciate you get it. So it's a very easy conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, Nikki, and your voice needs to be heard. Your work is so important because to weave us back to the original beginning, it is a bridge. You are doing work that is a bridge between our human intellectualization that we do and the unseen realms through your research. So that is so important to validate and to give more credit and credentials to what's actually happening for 1 in 4 Irish people.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you
Right.
too.
So
Yeah.
how can people get in touch with you, work with you? Where do they find you?
I am on Instagram on nicolatanyan.phd. And then I also have a website, nicolatanyan.com. And they're the two easiest ways to get hold of me. So
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, go Ramahagat, Nikki. Yeah, grow more.
Thank you. Yeah.